Hello and welcome to today's discussion on utopias organized by the Alternative Economic and Monetary System Summer School. We are really excited to have you with us for this interesting discussion. And before I introduce you to our speakers, Veronika Winter and Lino, Zeddies, I would like to just remind you of a couple of things. So if you've made it this far in Hop-In, you're already doing well. It's a little bit confusing at first. But if you see on your left-hand side, there is reception, sessions, networking. So after the talk, there will be a networking session where you can meet with different people and discuss. And for now, we ask you to not use the top share video and audio option. We will make that possible during the Q&A, so you will be able to come on stage and ask questions yourself, but only during the Q&A. So if you try to share your video and audio before, we will not let you on stage. So no worries about that. Throughout the event, there will be a Slido where you will be able to ask questions. So feel free to already take part throughout. And just so you know, if you come on stage, you will be recorded because the event is recorded. So keep that in mind. And also, I'm Haliki Kreinen. I'm from the Ecological Economics Institute, and I also organize the Alternative Economic and Monetary System Summer School. And welcome from all of us. And I would now like to pass you on to Karina Kampner. Karina, if you're ready for the introduction.
Yes. Hello, everybody. A warm welcome also from my side. I'm Karina. I'm working with the OeAD student housing, and together with the Academy for the Common Good, we initiated this Expert Talk Series. And why did we do that? Because sustainability is very close to our heart. It's very important for us. We try to include it in all of our actions. Our main business is to provide accommodation for students and professors in Austria, in a very eco-friendly and energy-efficient guest houses. We accommodate about 10,000 people a year, and over 60% of our own guest houses are built in a passive house standard. And we're a non-profit organization. Next to this main business, we initiated 2 summer schools. The first one is the Green Building Solution. And this is a master level program that aims at architects, the students of architecture, construction, engineering, and similar fields. And the students actually do passive house planning in this program. They are concerned about sustainable urban development, innovative architecture, and many more topics. And then we have the Alternative Economic and Monetary System Summer School. This is a 3-week program, and that aims at everybody who's interested to learn more about alternatives to the current economic and monetary system. Topics include the limits to growth, for example, the climate crisis, of course, the instabilities of the financial market, and a main part is also the strategies for a socio-ecological transformation. So, meaning how can we get to the utopias we all wish for? And the good thing is we still have some spots left. We have an extensive scholarship program, and students from lower income countries have the possibility to get empowerment scholarships, but also students from other countries have the possibility to get scholarships. That's true for both summer schools. And I'm going to put the link to the summer schools in the chat afterwards. The deadline is already the 1st of July for the scholarship applications. And one more announcement, our next expert talk, the GBS expert talk, gonna be on June 16th, and it's about decarbonizing buildings. And I'm also gonna put the link to this expert talk in the chat. Yeah, so now I'm gonna hand over to Haliki again and enjoy the talk with Lino and Veronika.
Okay, so I'm back. Thanks very much for that, Karina. So welcome everyone once again, and all the new people that have joined us. So I will now do a very quick introduction to today's topic. As we know, multiple studies indicate that we are about to transgress global material and environmental limits due to the increases in production and consumption since the Industrial Revolution. So this means that previous ideas of living well, more consumption, bigger houses, bigger cars, disposable and easy convenience consumption, these are no longer in line with future civilizational survival, actually. And as recent research published by Nature Communications actually just last week showed by Kieser and Lenzen, scenarios with decreased consumption and production are actually the only scenarios to minimize key risks and keep us below the 1.5 threshold. So in effect, scenarios that limit production and consumption are the only scientifically proven way of staying below 1.5 degrees. But of course, these go against our ideas of living well. But actually, are our ideas of living well in line with reality? Research also shows that more consumption has not added to welfare in the global north since the 1970s and 1980s, despite a huge escalation of consumption, and especially an escalation of the consumption of positional goods that prove our position in society. We are also experiencing rising inequality, rising insecurity, stress levels, social isolation, rising suicide rates, rising self-harm rates amongst teenagers, and much more because of this consumer society. So actually we are witnessing a decline in well-being despite rising consumption, as well as, of course, the exploitation of labor, land, and nature in the global south to provide us with all of these things. So utopian visions of consuming less and living better with less not only propose a way to stay within planetary boundaries, but actually they could be an answer to many of these problems and ills that plague our modern societies. So less inequality, more time with family and friends, time for communities, time for participation in society and civil society, less pressure to keep up with the Joneses, more social security, and so on. So a slower, happier, less materially intensive life that also incidentally helps us avoid civilizational collapse in the future. But while this might sound nice to all of us, currently substantial challenges, of course, remain when it comes to the political feasibility of such utopias, not only because of the widespread sort of marketing campaigns and ideas that show us that consumption and wealth and overconsumption are the main way to and an expression of living well. Okay, but from a huge research project on communicating climate change in Germany, we know that to get people active and involved, not passive and depressed about the climate change, we need to stay away from catastrophizing, and we need concrete utopias and positive visions for a life after transformation and change. And I'm very excited to be here discussing these topics today with our excellent speakers. And before I introduce the speakers, I would like to remind you quickly again, we will have a lot of time for discussion and debate. So if you have any questions or ideas, feel free to already write them down in Slido, or to write them down for yourself, and then we can give you the platform to ask them. So now, I would like to introduce our two brilliant speakers, Veronika Winter, who is an activist with Fridays for Future already for 2 years. Veronika is also studying German and biology to become a teacher, and she's studying in Vienna. And our second speaker is Lino Zeddies, who studied economics and is also an activist. Lino founded Reinventing Society, a project for real utopias, and he also wrote the book Utopia 2048. So we have a lot of experience in utopias. And that's it from me, from the very quick introduction. I would now like to ask Veronika to come on stage, and I will leave again so that you can have the full screen. Okay, perfect.
Hi, thank you very much for the warm introduction. I hope that you can hear me and the technique is working fine. I will now share my screen and give a short input on my perspective on this topic as an activist for global climate justice. Okay, so I want to share with you the perspective of an activist being part of a global climate movement led by the youth in nearly all countries of the world. I joined the Fridays for Future movement in the year 2019, and since then I'm taking a lot of time and energy to plan protests, actions, and to strengthen the movement, because I have learned that we need a strong, inclusive, civil movement to overcome the climate crisis and to reach real utopias. I learned that it's not the political institutional parties, not even the Green Party, it's not Bill Gates who will create that livable future we all long for. It's the people, and it has always been the people, just normal people like you and me. I'm really happy to have made that experience. I want to share that story with you today. So we have to organize as a society and to put decision makers under pressure. And most of all, we have to reach out and talk to each other. So thanks again for organizing this talk today. I prepared my input for you with some basic questions for the start, because we will continue discussing the details afterwards. So, yes, maybe some of you know that method. It's called Talanoa dialogue, and this discussion method derives from Fiji. It is a traditional method across the Pacific to reflect a process of inclusive, participatory, and transparent dialogue. So we want to create respectful atmosphere to build up trust with each other and amongst us. I want to share with you my answers for those 3 questions within the Talanoa dialogue, and they're called where are we? So Haliki introduced the state of the global planet already to us, but I want to give you the perspective of global climate justice again, just briefly. Where do we want to go and how do we get there? Yes, so I know we heard it over and over again, those roaring alarm clocks. And I just really often I had the experience that I think that there's some kind of lack of knowledge or misunderstanding, and that's really part of the problem. Because with raising temperatures, people think, okay, we are taking some steps on that stair, with reaching temperatures, and we take another step, and at the moment we're like at 1 and 1.2 degrees, and we can stop any time, and then the climate will be stabilized. But sadly, this is not the case, because the climate system is a complex system. So we really mustn't cross certain thresholds or tipping points. And scientists say that at 1.5 degrees, there's this tipping point, and then we don't know if we can stabilize the climate again. So we have to understand those, the climate system as a complex system, and also our ecological system as very complex, and that all those variables are interconnected. But we really have to pay attention that we act quickly and rapid to reach the transformation in time. Yes. On the other hand, we are not only in the climate crisis or ecological crisis, because there's this midst of multiple crises, and they're all rooted in those global injustices. So I really like this picture from Extinction Rebellion, because we should really stop saying that we're all in the same boat, since we are all in the same storm, and certain parts of society have more responsibility to solve the climate crisis than others. So also in the climate movement, we should address this multiple crises, because there's injustices like racism, sexism, and they're all rooted in a global injustice we have to tackle at once to overcome. Yes, and what's really interesting is that at the moment, or for the last few decades, solutions have been focusing very much, at least in the industrial countries or in the global north, solutions have focused on individual behavior changes. and not those systemic or collective approaches. Because also in the climate movement, the media or journalists are asking us, okay, but how can you really advocate climate justice when you still buy t-shirts at H&M or you have a mobile phone? How dare you? How can you still not live climate friendly? And at the moment, we are in that area and people are still blaming and shaming. And later on, I want to introduce a new perspective on that kind of situation. So the second question I want to answer with you or for you from my perspective is, where do we want to go? So what is this utopia within the climate justice movement, or from my perspective? And as Fridays for Future, we ask political leaders to do everything they can to achieve the Paris Agreement and to stop the world heating at 1.5 degrees. But to be crystal clear, a world heated 1.5 degrees in comparison to pre-industrial times is not paradise. So that still millions of people have to flee their homes. Agriculture is threatened, our livelihoods are still threatened, but this threshold is still a point where we can stabilize the climate. And this world can, although we have endangered so much and we have lost really much, we can still have a much better world than today, as I want to continue in my talk. So where do we want to go? We want to go to a world which is alive and thriving. So I personally imagine this world as a reviving nature, giving nature its place where it should have to be, where in cities we don't have to be we don't have to be afraid of cars being all over around. We are living in natural boundaries again. So the basic needs of every person on this world are guaranteed. We have overcome fears of not being able to pay the next rent or school fees or enough food. So the essential needs of everybody are guaranteed, and people have the time to take part in that, in that living world again, and not being afraid of having other pressure on them. So we want to reconnect with the living planet, and in my utopia, the world is much more colorful, much more alive. We have managed to restore ecosystem and and all that stuff. But still, we don't. It's not, for me, it's not enough to reach that 1.5 degrees goal, and it's also not in. I mean, it's really cool, but for me, it's really also important that we focus on a socially just world. So my utopia wants that all people are treated equal. They have the equal rights. The agenda on human rights is revived, and we have overcome those systemic oppression or exploitation by people in the global south, and we have really achieved equal rights for everybody. So those are those 3 dimensions on my utopia, and now it's about the tactics and the strategies to achieve that utopia. There are multiple solutions, and the solutions are already here. So I just wanted to show you one study that I really like, because it's also kind of referring to the social, to those tipping elements and tipping points in the physical climate system. And our society and our economic system is also like this complex system where we can achieve change really quickly and really fast when we activate certain social tipping elements. Then we can reach social tipping dynamics to stabilize the climate by the year 2050, for example. And I listed those elements that international climate scientists have identified just last year. So, for example, we have to to get there, we have to concentrate on those social tipping elements. For example, we have at energy production, we have to remove all fossil fuel subsidies, introduce decentralized energy generation systems. And human settlements are another tipping element, because by the year 2050, 70% of all the people on the planet will live in cities. So when we implement carbon neutral cities, we can reach dynamics that will spread out and can also influence other social tipping elements. Yes, and also the financial markets are really important, and the norms and value systems. So when we concentrate on norms and value systems, and when we explain the moral situation of using fossil fuels, we can also reach really great dynamics, for example. And the same is with the education system, when we, for example, strengthen climate education and engagement. Yes, last but not least, we also heard about it, being climate activists can really be psychologically really tough work. So we also have to build up climate resilience. And I think this is a very interesting approach, because climate resilience means the resource or capability to deal with the climate crisis and its dangers in a healthy cognitive, emotional, social, and action-orientated way. And climate resilience doesn't only mean that we have to be resilient to the climate crisis as individuals, but also as a collective society. So to reach this utopia, we have to concentrate on adaptation and transformation, but as well on the individual as also on the collective scale. And by learning this, we can be much more active and really not only work as climate action for 1 year and then we are done, because we really have to do a marathon. We cannot only do the sprint, we have to do a marathon, and we have to be resilient to take all that action that is needed. Yes, and to finish my input, I'm part of Fridays for Future because I think that we really need those mass protests. We need kinds of civil disobedience. We need to address the global crisis in their multiplicity. So we really have to do alliances with groups and actors outside our eco-bubbles. Everybody should be able to participate in those movements. We have to build up a movement that is open for everybody. So from workers to school children to scientists to pop culture leaders, for everybody. So we really have to do those unusual alliances. And when we achieve that, I'm really confident that we can do the transformation that is needed. So last but not least, it will be tough work, and let's not be afraid of the transformation. Let's embrace our responsibility and work for change by design, not by disaster. Thank you very much. It will never be too late to make that difference.
I came in a bit too early there. Thank you so much, Veronika, for your inspiring talk. And now we are ready for Lino, if he's also wants to join us. And just a reminder, if you have any questions or comments, just keep them coming on Slido. We have 2 already, so feel free to comment. So Lino, now the floor is yours.
Okay, yeah, also thank you very much for hosting this event and inviting me. And here's my presentation. So let's talk Utopia is the title of my little presentation, where I want to share some ideas and insights on being a utopian and utopian activism and how to employ utopias for social and economic transformation. And in the last 2 years, I've engaged very intensely with utopias, as I've written a book and now recently founded even an organization or co-founded it with others on spreading and developing utopian visions. And currently, I think we all know we are in times of great struggle and crises. We have the climate crisis, the corona crisis, financial crises, and on and on. And unfortunately, it seems to me that most people lack a vision of a better world and are rather stuck in the current structures and stuck with the TINA principle of there is no alternative. And so it seems the only way forward is more of the same old. And I think we won't get to a better place with that. We will only intensify our problems. So what's really needed is positive visions for the future, or in other words, utopias. And therefore, because of this huge lack of utopian visions, and because on the other hand, I felt I have a vision for a better world, about a year ago, I published a book called Utopia 2048. And on this slide, I want to present my utopian vision for a better society, and then dig a bit deeper on my insights on the journey of becoming a utopian author and utopian activist. So my personal utopian vision, which I described in the book, entails beautiful green cities without cars, where there's lots of art, but not so much advertisement anymore in public, where there's regenerative agriculture, where the democratization has deepened, where all structures of society are democratized. The neighborhoods, the workplaces, the schools, everything is much more democratic. People have a basic income and are not forced to do jobs they don't like. There's much more freedom to express your gifts to the world and less insecurity. Schools are reformed, so pupils are free to follow their passions, their curiosity, and to express their personal gifts to the world, instead of preset curriculums where they just need to learn information that they not care about. Organizations are democratic and purpose-driven. There's international peace and a strengthened UN and international community. And further, there's actually a variety of economic and political systems serving the common good and sustainability. And many more things. I really described to write about a holistic, different society and describe how people live together, how they resolve conflict, how the schools are up to the big international structures in the form of a novel that's easy to grasp. And here are some further artworks I commissioned for the book. This is how Singapore could look like. So you see it's much more beautiful and green as it is now. And here's Cologne, also quite beautiful, I think. And for me, these utopian visions really open something up in me. They really create inspiration and hope and also aspiration to get there. And that's also what my experience is from working with utopias and spreading these visions, that many people are really hungry for this, really crave for positive visions that they can run to. And also having a utopian vision on your mind is like a magnet that's pulling you there without much effort, actually. And however, I feel that the utopian world I described is based on some principles that are actually more important than the concrete solutions. So while I described very concrete solutions in the book, like the basic income and certain tax reforms and how organizations work and so on, for me, it's not so important how exactly this utopian society works like, but rather which principles it's based on. And for me, it's really a new set of principles, which you can contrast with the current principles of capitalism, or you could call it also the story of separation, where the principles are control, competition, functionality, ego, hierarchy, and short-term profit. And for me, this better utopian world that I envision is based on a story of interbeing, of interconnectedness, where it's based on trust, collaboration, beauty, community, participation, and sustainability. And it's like a new logic where I feel or I want to strive to, and where I want to invite to with this utopian vision. And there are endless concrete versions how you could fulfill these principles, endless concrete utopias you could write about, and mine is just one version. But I think these principles are really where we need to go, and where I feel which is a much better place to go to. And the power of utopias, which I found, is that it really brings great inspiration and motivation. It is a new goal where you can strive to. It creates creativity and sparks new ideas. It really opens something up in you, and you're like, wow, yeah, we could do this and this, and get lots of new ideas. It helps to open people up for change and new possibilities, because in the current, let's say, old world mindset, many people are really afraid of change because the current setup is difficult for them, and then every change might make it worse for them. And then having a big positive vision helps to open people for transformation, for changes to the unknown. Further, utopias can create unity as they create the bigger picture, so people see the bigger picture and don't get lost so much in the little battles of their maybe field of activism, and see the bigger picture, the more important spheres, and therefore it's easier to build alliances with others from maybe different spheres, other mindsets, and see, maybe we are all working to the same direction, even though maybe on the micro level we have some different strategies or so. And lastly, of course, utopias can be a guiding star that give orientation for the direction where we could go to and want to develop to. And so I think it's really important that we have more utopias in our societies, and there's such a lack, unfortunately, currently, of utopian media. There are very few books or movies. There are some documentaries which I would call utopian, but not really like acted movies at all. I think there's not really one at all, and therefore it's kind of logic that most people don't have a vision. The media are full with dystopias, but there are very, very few utopias, and I think we need many more, and also different ones, so people can decide, this is a nice direction, or I prefer this, and can start a discussion of where we really want to go. And currently the debate is much more focused on where we don't want to go, or what the problems are, but without a way forward, without a vision where we could go instead, I think we won't get anywhere. And then closely connected with the power of utopias and utopian media, I think, is a new way of thinking, which I call the utopian mindset. And for me, it's really being in a way of thinking where you are inspired, creative, energized, where you have these visions for things, where you are open, connective, constructive, positive, and think of possibilities and potentials. And when I wrote this book, Utopia 2048, I was very often in this mindset, and more for me, it's now the default mindset, where I run around in the world and see, we could do this, and there are synergies and there are potentials here and there. And it's really powerful. But for me, it was also a thing of learning to use this mindset, like putting on a certain type of glasses where the world looks differently. And I think not many people are yet able to look through this mindset at the world. And a new mindset creates a new reality for us. It creates new possibilities and ways where we could go. And currently, many people are stuck in a mindset where not many possibilities are out there. It's only one way forward, which is the old way. And with this utopian mindset, it opens many new possibilities. So I think it's also important to spread this mindset, and people can get invited to this through utopian media and events and seminars where they can relax into all these possibilities. And then some more words on how to get to a better world, or how to get to a utopia. And what I found is that congruence is very important. So on the one hand, inner congruence in terms of the different spheres of our activism. So I think it's helpful to think in these spheres of the individual sphere, the organizational sphere, how we work together, and then the big society sphere. And let's say if I'm an activist or are in an eminent activist organization for peace, then I need to employ these values of peace on all spheres. Otherwise, I won't be effective to build a peaceful world finally. And however, if I'm fighting with myself, have inner conflicts, or in my organization we can't resolve conflict, then how could we bring peace to the world, to the bigger society? And unfortunately, I see that many activist organizations, especially the very old big ones, are not congruent on those three levels. They often strive for changes on the society level, but don't employ them in their everyday interactions, or the people working there don't employ them in their own lives. And if we build up congruence on all three levels, I think the power increases massively for change. So I think it's really important, if you want to build a utopian society with different values, to bring these values to all three layers of your being, of your activism. And further, also path congruence, because I think the utopian world is not something really far in the distant future where we strive to and struggle to and then finally arrive, but rather it must be something that starts today, where as best as we can, we need to represent the principles of the destination on our path of transformation. So again, if we want to build peace, we need to start with peace now, with our everyday interaction, with how we behave ourselves. If we want to have a sustainable world, we need to be sustainable now on all levels and layers. And if we want to have a more joyful world and fun world, then our activism needs to be joyful and fun. And if it's a grim struggle, then we won't get anywhere. And maybe it seems simple, but it's really not something which I see is fulfilled by many activists and activist organizations. And I think there's huge potential to be more path congruent and have more inner congruence on these three layers. So that's something I think which is very important. And yeah, that's already it. If you're curious to read more, also read about my concrete utopia, you can actually download my book for free on utopia2048.com. Here is a link. It has a Creative Commons license, which allows free download. And if you want to know more about my organization, Reinventing Society, where we also host events and create utopian media, then here's our website. And that's it. So thanks for your attention. And now I'm looking forward to the discussion and questions.
Hi, thank you so much, Lino. And yeah, Veronika is also here already. That's great. I can see that there are already some questions on Slido as well. But before we get to that, are there any comments or questions that you have for each other? Maybe something that specifically moved you? While you think about it, I can maybe start us off. So, and this also relates to a question that we received. But basically, I think we share a utopian vision. Lino, I think I'm with you there. I would love to live in a slower, greener world where I don't have to worry about cars running me over, and where we have more time and so on together. And I think it's a very similar utopia actually to what many sort of groups had in the 1970s as well. And it's very interesting to look into these discussions that happened then, because I think, yeah, we share a lot. And for some reason, these discussions were completely sidelined then in the 1980s with the rise of individualism and so on. And of course, today it's kind of considered maybe a bit hippie or a bit, it's sidelined in society, so to speak. But how can we get these visions to the broader audience, apart from what you mentioned? So these utopian workshops and so on. How can we how can we get them out there when we have also a huge advertising and marketing industry working against us? And maybe what can we learn from the 1970s, from all of these discussions that in a way failed? Maybe that was 3 questions, but you can answer either of them or any of those questions. So I don't know who wants to go first.
I have some ideas. Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Yeah, definitely. I think in the 70s there were some movements and some similarities where they strive for a similar vision. I think the Green Party also started with a very similar vision, but maybe the time was not ripe yet. I think in our current times, the crises go much deeper, and I think more and more people are now aware that we can't continue with business as usual. And I think in the 70s, probably the majority of people was still feeling that we are developing in a good way, we are growing, and it's nice, we get richer and more wealthy, and the other countries in the world will soon catch up, and then everything will be fine. And so I think, yeah, now the time is very different, that more people, or the majority maybe, feels that we can't continue like this. The climate crisis is not knocking on the door a little bit, but really crashing through it already pretty much. We sense the heating, the oceans are dying, like animals go extinct every day. So I think the climate for change is different too. And I feel like, especially with the Corona crisis, that also hit something. And in the last years, more utopian books were published. I know of other authors who plan to write stuff. And in the last decades, there were barely any utopian books. It's really, there's barely anything. There's so much dystopian stuff, but barely any utopian stuff. I wouldn't have written my book if there had been similar books. And now more and more are popping up. So I think it's really now a time for utopias coming. And the way forward for me is to really spread them more and more. We need utopian movies and events and much more art and many more books. So we need to have a utopian culture so that these visions for a better future are really in all the minds of the people. And I think then they really create a pull where we automatically go there, because if people see this potential, this possibility to develop in such a much more beautiful direction, then who wouldn't want to go there? Who would still want these stinking, ugly cities and bad food and like soulless workplaces if we could build a so much more beautiful future? But also, aside from the art, we need these practical solutions. And I think they are still on the fringes and the minorities. There are organizations and there's permaculture and all this stuff, but many people don't know about it. And I think, yeah, I have this expert knowledge of all these things out there, but if everyone knew this, I think we would go there so quickly, but most people don't know it yet. So I think we need to cultivate these solutions and grow them and spread them, and they are growing also as well. It's question is just if it's going quick enough or not.
Yeah, thanks very much. Veronika?
Yes, so I want to highlight some ideas. So I enjoy your view, Lino, and I really want that city so much. That's why I'm organizing all those protests. And tomorrow we do a protest again, new motorways in Vienna. And yeah, I think it's important to have those concrete bites to make it for people easy to grasp the injustices. And also for me, I think, yeah, everything could have been gone fine in the 1917s when all the people would have get it. But yes, we can't change it anymore. So we can't change the past. And the urgency has never been that big as it is nowadays. It has never been that urgent. So the crises are doing their work to make us protest and everything. But also the preconditions have never been that good. So nowadays we have utopian authors now working on those concrete solutions. We have global movements that are interconnected around the globe. So Fridays for Future would have never worked in the 1970s like it has worked today, because Greta Thunberg in Sweden, she started striking with that little sign, and then Australia was in fact the country that has been among the first ones that organized really great mass protests. And then it ping-ponged to Sweden again, and with social media and everything, we can share those ideas really quickly. So the preconditions are so good in so many ways. And for me, I think I also maybe I can also share my stories, because I, as a school kid, I was always interested in those injustices, but I never learned about the opportunities where I can engage. In my social surroundings, peer group and everything, nobody had the idea, yeah, let's go to a protest. Let's do something outside in the society. And nowadays, some things are changing, because with kids at Fridays for Future, they learn how to make their voices heard. And they learn, okay, I have never done a video for such a movement, but then another person says, hey, could you please do a video? Could you please write that sign? Could you do this and that? And then people just try to do it. And now they are the experts in the movement, telling other people, new people, hey, I trust you. We have this common goal. Let's do this. So I think sometimes when we really get desperate about, okay, we're not going to make that, we're too slow and everything, I also think that change can really happen so fast. So with understanding society as that complex system, and at this complex system, and then we can reach really this dynamics, for example, in schools. So when children now learn about, not only in history, they learn about wars and conflicts and everything, but maybe they could learn about how the human rights agenda was achieved and how we did all those great achievements. Then we really can do those mindsets really quickly, because there are so many families who have children, and with also youth leading such movements, we really can do the transformation in time.
Great, thank you. I'm also much more hopeful for the younger generations. There is even a question on Slido from Dominic about whether it's too late for the older generations to deeply change their ways of living and to move towards a sustainable, fairer, more resilient global society. So, what do you guys think about that? Is it too late for the older generation?
Yes, maybe I can also start. I think it's never too late, but I'm also convinced that we don't have to talk to all climate deniers. So it's really also, I think it's important to reflect on, okay, where do we put our energy, and not to fight some, just really have to discuss, okay, what are we going to do? And I really think there is so much potential in education and school systems. So for me, I really like to do those workshops there, and also leaving children the job to convince their own parents. And I also think that it's important that for me as a climate activist, I don't have to do all those discussions with all the other groups. So maybe it's better that we have alliances like Parents for Future or Workers for Future, and in their institutions, they try to talk to their peer group. So people listen more to those people in their peer group. And there are so many great examples, but we don't have to convince everybody. And we will reach a dynamic, and then people will like to have that utopia too.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have much to add, I think. Of course, everyone can change and add to the transformation, but it's probably easier for the younger generations, as we're also standing on the shoulders of our parents and the other generations with the war and post-war generation, and we are much more privileged in many domains, and it enables more things, I think. But yeah.
Yes, and maybe something to add. I mean, all parents want a livable future for their children. So when we, like Lino told us, when we have this goal orientation, and then we can really reach out to many people that have always blocked, no, I don't want to change, I don't want that change. But when we can achieve to talk to those same values, and like the livable future for children, then we have good chances to reach to those people as well.
Have a comment from Ted Brown from an older generation, and he says it's very difficult for believe me, it's very difficult for the older generation to change. So we have some pushback there. Okay, just on a side note, maybe Matthias Mitterauer, I don't know if you're here, if you want to come on stage maybe to ask your question. If anyone wants to come on stage, then feel free to share your also your audio and video now. Otherwise, I will just ask your questions for you. But Matthias, okay, he's asked, what are the 3 most important measures you would take if you could? So I assume this is policy measures or any other action if you had the power. Lino, do you want to go first this time?
Yeah, for me, it's citizen councils. I'm a huge fan of citizen councils. They are getting much more prominent in the last years. There have been 2 in Germany over the last year, I think, on Germany's role in the world and also the climate. And I think that's really upgrading our democratic system if we institutionalize them and really give more power to the people, kind of, and further a basic income. I'm a huge fan of a basic income. I think it also frees up so much mental space for people that are not then afraid anymore of poverty and having to do jobs they don't want to do, and often those jobs are harmful for nature and society. And I believe everyone has a gift to give to the world, and if we free people to unleash their gifts, then we have a so much more beautiful and rich world in every sense. And lastly, sovereign money reform, which is a certain reform to change the money system in a sense that money is not created as debt by private banks anymore, but by a public institution serving the needs of the people. It's a bit technical maybe, but maybe some people have heard of it. And I think it would be a huge game changer, because currently the money system is just doing so much harm. Yeah, those are my golden 3 changes.
Yes, and for me, I had that question already sometimes, and also think, okay, yes, we just have to do those three measures and then everything will be fine. So that's a bit simplistic, and I want to invite everybody to also to be open-minded, because we will need so many solutions. But still, I have some favorite measures, and I'm aware that those will not be the only ones. I really want to, for example, Austria spends millions of euros into fossil fuel subsidies, and politicians always tell us, sorry, no, we don't have the money, and we will leave the market regulate itself. But for me, it's really, that was so mind-blowing in my own personal development, that the state is in fact using all the citizens' money to subsidize fossil fuels. So that would be for me one of the first measures I want to introduce. And it's also really those car-free cities. So also in Vienna, last summer, we had a great discussion about maybe one district being car-free, and it was so polarized and emotional. And I think, maybe those SUVs driver, they will start crying or something when they can't, when they don't use public space anymore. But I think that's really important, because as well as in times of Corona pandemic, we really need more public spaces, and there people can connect to each other again. And it's really so unfair that 2/3 of Vienna are used for cars. And third measure is really the education system, because when I went to school, I never learned about the climate crisis, and that's unimaginable from my point of view now. So we really have to do a great campaign. So not only for the school children, it's not the school children who have to learn everything. It's about the broad society, and we really have to have campaigns like we did already in the past. that would be 3 measures.
Great. There is also a comment about the education system from a student that it's basically difficult to have this mind shift change because our education system is obviously teaching outdated models of thinking and old mindsets. But I guess you, Veronika, you're going to be a teacher, so I have a lot of faith in you. You're going to change things.
Yeah, and also I want to invite everybody. Yeah, please talk up on it. So go to your professors, go to your teachers, and ask them to do more climate education. Because for me, I studied biology to become a teacher, and in my whole bachelor, I didn't learn about it. And now we have those courses because as a team, for our master thesis, we asked to do a course on climate education, and now it's in the curriculum. So also Fridays for Future in other countries, in Austria, they try to influence also the school systems and the curricula, so change is possible. And when many people ask that, then it's also, yeah, we could achieve something, and that's also nice, yeah.
That's a really, that's a really brilliant outcome. So congratulations on that, actually. That's really, really cool. We had someone pop up who then popped away.
On schools, may I add one remark? I can really recommend the movie or the documentary School Circles on some alternative schools. I really liked it. And of course, the general school system needs to transform massively, but there are these alternative schools out there already, which are really awesome and democratic and participatory, and where students can follow their passions and curiosity. So there are already really great schools. We just need to scale it up.
Form is a part of our utopia as well.
Yes, definitely.
Definitely. Is there anyone else that wants to come on stage to ask a question? I'm looking at Jarmo, for example. If you want to join us, I'm trying to keep an eye on the discussion here. Yeah. Oh, Matthias is here. Okay. Let's.
I think I had a little bit problems with the technique. Yeah.
Hi, Matthias. Nice to have you.
Yeah, so I don't want to be too pessimistic. Yeah, I'm twice as old as you are, yeah, as you can see. Yeah, as I was so at that age you are now. Yeah, I studied environmental science and also economics, and I tried to convince the older generation. Yeah, and I talked to my uncles and to my parents. Yeah, we have to make a change. Because this was in the 90s, and yeah. The only thing they said to me is, your generation will do it, yeah. And now it's 30 years later, yeah, and nothing happened, yeah, nothing. It got worse, yeah. So I'm not really convinced that you can do it. Really hard measures, yeah. It's good to have a utopia. That's a good point, yeah. But I think you have to be really concrete with your measures and to say what you will do, yeah. So only to say we have to change the financial system, for example, that's not enough, yeah. We have to say, okay, we will close down the stock exchange, for example, or we will make reforms there, yeah. We have to make derivative trading is harmful, yeah, and we have to stop that, and we have to stop stock exchange on a second basis, yeah, that we make trades every millisecond, yeah. That's harmful to the world, yeah. And I think we have to have really concrete measures, and then you will have people who will oppose you, yeah, for that, yeah. How would you deal with these opponents? Yeah, that's a real big problem. I tried to live without a car now, yeah, and you can't imagine how difficult that is, yeah. This little small measure, yeah. I try, yeah, and my daughter says to me, "That's not enough, yeah, that's not enough. What did you do in your life, yeah?" I said, "Okay, I try to convince people. I try to make things better, yeah, for me personally, because I thought." I found out it was not possible on a big basis, yeah. And they say to me, children, I was also on this demonstrations. Yeah, this Friday for Future, I was 4 times there with my children because it's the only thing they can do. Yeah, but it's not enough. That's not enough. That won't save the world. Yeah, you have to be more concrete and more measures. And I think you have to make alliances and be real hard to those who oppose you. Yeah. Yeah, how do you think about that? Yeah, it was a
I sense some guilt there in your voice, Matthias. I sense some guilt maybe in the background, but I think Veronika, she has it sorted, so she has the answer now. So Veronika.
Yeah, it's just easy. Maybe one thing about the guilt pressure thing. For me, it was the same. So I really had that strict thing. I will never buy something in a supermarket again. I will never go to H&M again. I did that for 1 year. And I really was this kind of person who thought, yeah, when I'm gonna change my individual climate behavior completely, then I have done my contribution. And that is this mindset of individual behavior change and being an individual person in this world. But we are not only those individual persons. We can organize in an organization, in a society to change the system, because I really had that development that I can't in the supermarket, I can't do climate friendly actions because the whole system is climate damaging. And that, yeah, so many school children and also students made that development, and the industry told us for 30 years that it's us who are responsible for the climate crisis. So people really felt guilty and feel bad and everything. And also today, I talk to so many colleagues who tell me, yeah, I think that's so good what you do, but I couldn't go to a climate strike because I'm taking flights. And this is so dangerous. We are trying to do campaigns and talk about that issue, but we should always be allowed to participate in our democracy, whether or not we can behave climate friendly and everything. And the other thing is with these concrete measures and bigger measures, wider measures, this is really hard because there are hundreds of concrete measures. So as a political movement like Fridays for Future, we do huge debates on what are our public measures, what do we communicate? And we also think about, okay, so the measures have to be understandable. That were some really nice measures, but when I tell in school some children go to the climate strike because we have to unroll the financial markets, then those people won't come to a climate strike. So as a movement, we always have to think, okay, when do we communicate what to which target group? That's really important for our strategies and everything. And we will never be a perfect climate movement. That's also, I think that's really important to have that in mind. Yes, so I think it's also important that other actors in the movement do the more concrete measures. And then there are also those global movements who concentrate on other communication strategies.
Lino?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that that I think it's really important to build alliances and to do the changes holistically, because I often see that, for example, people who want to reform the financial system, maybe they have a bank a bank account at an about the money stuff and the alternative money stuff, but then maybe they don't care about where their food comes from, to which school their children go to, are flying around the world and so on. And on the other hand, maybe there are the climate activists who care for sustainable farming, where their food comes from, but don't know about the money system and have their bank account maybe at a traditional bank or a Deutsche Bank even, or whatever, a very simple example. But I think we would get much more powerful if all these activists see the bigger picture and then support all spheres of transformation. And then all these niches of the new world, so to say, which are currently very dried up of resources, would get much more energy, kind of. And I think, therefore, utopias can be really helpful to see this bigger picture, and so that people can build the holistic alternative way of being. And of course, we also need the bigger changes of the society, but as an individual, I can only start with myself, but then can, of course, build these alliances with other like-minded people. And in terms of dealing with the old system, kind of, I think it's always good not to engage in a fight, and try to really also understand the people, see the individual behind it, what their needs are, what their struggles are, and really try to feel into them, to understand them, so that they can really also listen to you. Because if you're fighting them, then they just block off and won't listen to you at all. But ultimately, if that fails, then I think it's good not to focus the energy on the enemy, so to say, but rather on building the solutions. And I see for nearly everything you want to do or buy, there is already an alternative organization with a cooler approach, with these utopian principles that I depicted. And nearly everything you can buy from an alternative or do it on an alternative way. And so I think it's really helpful to engage with all this holistically.
Veronika wants to add something.
Yeah, so maybe I just want to add. So I really I really wish that everybody sees all the solutions, but my point was rather that people shouldn't stop participating in political movements when they haven't done all the other actions in their everyday life perfectly, because still nowadays it's a privilege to have the knowledge and to also have the money to decide for the other option in some other markets. So I think we also I think it's important that we have those idealistic utopias, so that we can tell people, hey, that's the goal, are you going with us? But still, with each other, we also have to be really compassionate and build up trust and respect. And I think the environmental movement in the past, I mean, that's just a hypothesis. There was much of this blaming and shaming, and so people haven't been really empowered to do more than outside their own four walls. That was just what I noticed really often.
Okay, let's wait for some furious answers on that, maybe. But in the meantime, if there's a couple of questions from Benjamin, for example. Benjamin, do you want to join us on stage? There's a question on democratization and institutions. Or if anyone else would like to ask a question, you can now simply share your screen. Okay, Benjamin's here. So I'll let you ask it yourself.
Yeah, I have one question that is quite specific to Lino. You mentioned the democratization of our institutions, schools, and monetary systems and healthcare systems, whatever. What's your view on the democratization of the digital space, which would require like probably a kind of digital citizenship as well?
Ooh, I'm not much of an expert in this domain. I think it would be good to democratize as much as possible, especially get away from these huge internet platforms, to have more of a ecosystem of different providers which are democratic in themselves again, and to have data owned by the people and not privately stored in big companies who will sell them. But yeah, I'm not a huge expert in this area, I'm afraid.
Veronika, do you want to add anything to this?
Maybe I just want to add that as for future movement, we also within our movement, we sometimes have the struggle. Okay, do we use Google or anything like that, or do we use social media at all? Because we know that social media, like it is organized today, it's harmful, and there are so many negative aspects of it. But still, we don't have the time to not use this old system, because we have to also be kind of pragmatic. And of course, we should promote those solutions, but to some extent, also as a youth movement, we're not experts in everything. We have to kind of use also the old system to bring our measures and our demands forward. So that's, I think, beneath all those discussions, there's also this feeling, okay, we have this idealistic goal, and we are so hurt by not being able to use it all the time. And I think we have to build up kind of resilience to deal with those different, what's the word? Yeah, those different sides.
I guess that comes back to the perfectionism that you mentioned earlier, that we don't have to be perfect individuals, we have to change the societal structures. And Lino, sorry, I muted you because there was a little bit of feedback, so nothing personal.
Yeah, sorry, I meant ambivalence. I think we really have to do those ambivalences in our nowadays systems, and we should not be afraid of, yeah, we just have to.
100% agree. Lino?
Yeah, and I think it's always a thing of balance and of also trusting yourself and fighting yourself and forcing a perfectionism on yourself to be perfectly sustainable and everything. That's, I think, again, potentially coming from the logic of the old system of fighting yourself on your needs and then forcing certain behaviors on yourselves. And I think the better way is to rather trust yourself, but really deeply try to feel into those solutions, what's really serving you, what's nourishing you, which behavior feels good to you. And then if, for me, for example, like with food-wise, like a McDonald's burger tastes horrible for me now, maybe because I now taste it with my whole body and really sense into it and feel like, that's really trashy food, that's not good for me. And so it's really not hard to be vegan for me anymore and to buy healthy food from a Solavi. And in many domains, I feel it's even if stuff is more expensive, but if I feel, wow, that's a company I really like, I know about them, I have a relationship to them, then it's really easy to do this stuff because I just feel, wow, that's in line with my values, and it's not something I need to force on myself. And I think then it's also okay to not be perfect. And if you really need a vacation, then maybe it's okay to drive somewhere with a car and whatever. And then if that gives you the energy to be more sustainable in other areas of your life. But it's, yeah, I think it's also trusting ourselves in what we really need and want and not forcing stuff. Yeah.
Definitely. I really liked what you said about how that's the old system, like this perfectionism. It's really good. I actually haven't thought about it that way. We have a couple more questions here, and please keep the questions coming. And also, if you want to ask your question live, then please share your video and audio, and it might take a couple of minutes, but I will then put you on. And there's a question about dystopias and utopias, and the suggestion is that it's more difficult to focus on a positive utopia than it is on a dark dystopia. So first of all, do you agree? Do you think it's easier to focus on or is that why we have so many more dystopias? And what can we do about it? Maybe that would be the other question.
So why we have so many dystopias, I think in one way it's also how our brain is wired, that we have a strong focus on challenges, on risks and so on. So it's easier to imagine them maybe. And also, I think it's also path dependency, that if there are 10 dystopian movies and you're a movie director, it's much easier for you to imagine another dystopian movie than, they said utopian or dystopian. I mean, if there are 10 dystopian movies, it's easier to imagine another dystopian movie. And as there is barely any utopian media, it's really hard to imagine it for many people. And it's much easier to do the same stuff that everyone does, that you're used to. And further, I feel, especially nowadays in such a complex world, it requires lots of knowledge to build a coherent utopia. For me, over the last 10 years, I engaged with all these different spheres of transformation, of trauma healing, organizational transformation, the money system, economic transformation, democracy and everything. And to build a coherent utopia, I felt like I really needed all these building blocks to put them together. And it's not so easy to just imagine something and then put it out there. And if I just imagine a utopia with a different money system, I think it won't feel logical if the other building blocks are not there. because a different money system requires a different democracy, and that requires different schools, and that requires different organizations and different workplaces and a different tax system and different. So it's all kind of interdependent, and so it's also much more difficult than maybe in older times, where maybe before we had democracies, it was much simpler to imagine a utopia where you have a democracy and people are more free. And now we have the much more complex world where you need to, imagine much more spheres and changes.
Yes, and maybe to add some stuff, I also think that we need now it's this kind of old thinking, and for the media it has always been, we are always focused on bad news. So that question is a cultural thing, and we need cultural change and changes in our norms and value systems. And I really also think we also shouldn't tell, okay, we can't change that because it had always been like this. So it's also as activists or people who have to ask media to report differently about the climate and ecological and global crises. So also now, as there are many initiatives who are trying to change their ways of reporting about all those crises, because there have also been many demands. And for the film industry, there are also those positive examples. And so there is some good development inside, I think.
There was an interesting question from Hans, Hans Florian, but I'm not entirely sure if I understood it. So I was trying to suggest that Hans come on stage. Okay, he's here. Excellent. So perfect.
Lino already asked why. And maybe you see, I'm one of the unchangeable older generations. And so I love the songs of Leonard Cohen. And he says, there's a crack in everything. That's where the light comes in. And not even Copernicus was kind of angry that the planetary distances didn't fit in the figure he made. And anything which is coherent is except incoherence in sense of the sense. And I wouldn't like anybody to design a future for me, not even you, Lino. And then I move in, and everything is perfect. No, we have to do that together. There is no alternative, really no alternative to designing the future together in freedom and in understanding the others. We need to co-evolute. And co-evolution is not started by painting a picture of the future. I don't object anything what you do, Lino. I'm a fan of you, but maybe this has to be thought of too.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. Lino, do you want to go ahead and reply to that?
I think I even agree to that, and I see my book, for example, also just as an invitation. I don't want to force this on anyone, or even not on myself. I'm not sure if where we want to go, where society will develop might be completely different. It might be even better than that, or so. It's rather an invitation to think about it. And I really want more utopias, and I hope for so many different utopias to really spark discussion and then really go together there and really co-evolve these utopias and design them together. I like this concept of the open and relative utopias, because they are always relative to our current times and circumstances. And I think I'm aware of that it's always limited. And in 10 years, I might have a completely different view. And I really enjoy feedback from others, what they would like different and so on. But for me, it's therefore really more important about those principles. I think I'm more fixated on them, but I wouldn't. I would be surprised if others feel like, no, I don't like them. I prefer the capitalist principles. But people are free to do that if they prefer those. And after all, my utopia is also has different societies with different systems. So if there's an island where the capitalists are and have the competing organizations, then if people enjoy that, then why not? As long as that's not harming the rest of the world. But I think it's also good to allow freedom and different systems in the world, and so people can find their place.
I think that island exists, and it's the Seychelles Island. But I think it's really radical what you're doing, just suggesting that we rethink things. I mean, I think thinking of utopias in itself is just not something that we're used to at all anymore. So I think that's the key thing, even to
Yes.
think about that.
So maybe also in our school systems and everything, in our everyday life, we don't have the opportunity to strengthen our imagination capacity. So that is really a radical thing, to just take your time and picture the world in different colors than it is done nowadays. And I think really many people, they can imagine the end of the world better than the transformation to avoid it. And this is so crazy because it's a basic thing, human creativity, imagination, and we maybe have stopped to learn it, or we forgot it. And so it's really nice to introduce those books and films and songs and everything. And also in the culture scene, in the music scene, there are now so many more songs dealing with those problems, and I think that can also be a game changer. So when we have more books and culture things dealing with transformation.
I think this is where we come back to the advertising and marketing industry again, right? And how it also shapes in what we think is normal and what we think is possible and what we think is real and fact, and so on. Maybe. If you don't have any other comments on this topic, I would maybe ask Lucas Schwartz to come on, hop on stage. If you want, Lucas, you can share your screen. But Lucas's question is about how we address the group of rich and super rich. Okay, he cannot jump on stage. So how do we have to reach the rich and the super rich? I mean, globally, I guess we are the rich. But do we have to, and how can we? Veronika, do you want to go?
Yeah, maybe that was also kind of in the discussion before. What are we doing as such a little group and all those oil giants? How can we gain the political power? And yeah, we have to create moral conflicts. I mean, slavery was also abolished, and it was not abolished because 99% of society were okay with it. It got immoral. And I think Fridays for Future, with that youth perspective, is really working much on that theme. So little children telling the policymakers, the decision makers, you have sold our future. And that's the moral conflict. And here, I know that's kind of a negative approach or something. It's different to creating utopias, but we also need those conflicts to go forward. And still also, like, maybe you have read the story with Exxon, and that now climate activists have reached to gain 2 seats in the board. And that's really like a David and Goliath stories. And we have those stories now. It's really so cool. We have those climate lawsuits all over Europe. They're popping up. Some are being won. And we also have to concentrate on that kind of victory stories, because we really need much courage to continue all that path. Yeah.
Yeah, again, I think it's very problematic if individual people are super rich. Like I'm talking now not about the average German, which is quite rich in terms of the world, but the super rich like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and so on. And still, I think it doesn't have to blame them, and to rather we need a cultural shift that also affects them of what's healthy and what's good for the world. And I think many of the super rich are already trying to do something good to the world, but from a mindset which I think is problematic, and we need to change those mindsets. But that also is the same in most foundations, I feel, where it's a power difference, where the foundation is then giving to someone, but has its own plan and is not on eye level very often, and not very democratic and often intransparent and so on. And I think we need a new culture also for philanthropy and foundations and so on. And I think that is already also changing. And I recently read something that the wife from Jeff Bezos, she's spending money quite nicely, I think. She got a bulk of his Amazon income. And also these Bitcoin millionaires, I think there are some interesting developments where they take different approaches and spend money quite nicely. But of course, there's huge power there. If Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates would spend his money differently on the systemic changes and not on some symptoms, that would be really helpful.
Suggestion from Veronika there to have maximum wages, I think.
Yes, I think it could be really dangerous. I mean, all that Bill Gates stories and everything, I mean, it's completely voluntarily for him to do so, and he could decide otherwise, like you said, Lino. So I think we need much more democratic control of the super rich institutions or individuals. Yeah.
I'm just seeing the time now. We're running out of time really fast. Thank you so much so far for all the great inputs and the discussion. Maybe it's now time for your closing statements. Any important giveaways, takeaways, giveaways that you want to emphasize, again, on any events you want to plug as well. Lino, do you maybe want to start this time?
I'm still thinking about a final statement after all these discussions and thoughts. Yeah, I think firstly, we really need more utopias, and also to allow ourselves, despite all the difficulties in the world and the struggles, to also look at the positive visions and as good as possible to step into such realities and around ourselves build little utopias within our communities and friendships and organizations. And I think then when we have these little utopias, that can really spread powerfully and inspire other people, because it's just so inspiring. And who wouldn't want to be in such an organization and such communities? But they are still quite rare. And yeah, and further to really do the change holistically and also not fight against ourselves, but live up to the values we want to see in the world, and allow fun and ease and passion to be in our activism, and not have it be a grim struggle against a big system, but rather inspire the others to, in our world, invite them in. I think that's good. Yeah, and thanks for the event and hosting. It was a pleasure to join.
Great, thank you so much. A quick reminder to everyone, please don't leave. We will have a networking session afterwards, so which you can see on the left-hand side under the sessions. And with that, I pass it on to Veronika.
Yes, thank you very much. There's not much to add, in fact, but I just want to invite everybody to be from time to time open-minded, to try new things. For me, it was a coincidence to take part of this climate strike, to be brave and to really try to engage in your communities, in your families, with your friends, with all those people near at your place, and then we can really make together a really great difference. Yeah. And maybe you also want to join some climate strike in your nearby city. In Vienna, tomorrow we have another protest to reach that car-free city. And I'm happy to see some of you again somewhere different place.
Be the protest, if I can ask?
It's at Schwarzenbergplatz. Mm-hmm. Yes, okay. At 1 p.m. I can search the Facebook event.
Okay, super. Okay, so everyone in Vienna, please go there tomorrow in a positive way. Okay, thank you so much for both of your inputs. It was such a nice thing to have a positive discussion for one. Really, I mean, I think even my mental health improved with that. And I invite you both to stay for the networking session and yeah, to talk to some of the participants. And I think that's all from our side.